Hey developers, so today we're going to look at the Quasar framework. I'm going to add some of the elements of the Quasar framework together to create this really simple app. And but let's just go ahead and dive into it. Hey, and if you are new to this series, I actually created a video before this where I just showed you how to install Quasar, get the Quasar CLI running. If you guys haven't watched that already, it's okay to jump to this one, but I would recommend look in the description below or right here and watch that first video, because that'll give you just a general idea of what the Quasar framework is. If you don't know, it's basically a Vue.js based framework which allows web developers to create responsive plus websites in many different flavors, and it has this really cool UI library that makes it really easy to add modals, chips, even has different plugins you can add into it. So the website we're going to create today is Breaking Bad information. It's just really simple. If you've been watching Netflix, El Camino just came out, and so I thought, this might be topical. So really all it does is we have this main page here, which if you just go to the main page, it just says Breaking Bad YouTube app, but you have these three tabs over here. One says Walter White, and as you can see, it shows Walter White has his information, has these two chips at the bottom of what his occupation is. We have one for Jesse Pinkman, and then we have one that says random. And this just randomly goes through and just chooses someone by random, like here's Nodos, here's Dr. Delcovi. So this is just a random. And the way I'm powering this is using the Breaking Bad API, which is doesn't have any authentication, no API keys. You just essentially hit this API endpoint, and it gives you some fun things about the characters from the show, like their occupation, their birthday, images, statuses. So I've added that all in here. By the way, if you click on any of the names, if they do have a birth date, it'll show the birth date. So this is just the dialogue popping up right here. So that's pretty much it. So let's take a look at how we would create something like this. So this is where we want to go, but this is where we're starting from. So if you go back to the previous YouTube video I did, this is essentially what we came up with. If you go to / I believe Erik, maybe let me see here. If I go to, I think I don't have the right history mode in. If you go to Erik right here, you can see, I just created some random elements that I got directly from the Quasar. I just kind of copy and paste it in here. So let's take a look. Here is the app, and I'll make sure to include in the description below where you can get the GitHub for this and you can follow along. I'm going to go through this quickly. If you guys need to, make sure you pause at any time to see what I'm doing. But we'll go through it here. So the first thing I want to do is, I'm not a big fan of having the hashtag or hash mark here. You can actually turn on the history mode. So to do that, I'm going to go into the Quasar conf, and I believe I've just searched for history, view router mode history, and I'll just save it. And now it works a little bit better. It's still reloading here. Make sure it loads. By the way, yep, there it goes. By the way, I have the terminal running at the bottom. It's just reloading on every time I refresh. It's kind of built into the Quasar. So now if I go /Erik, there it is. So I don't have to have the hash there. It does history mode the correct way that I like it. Also, one thing to point out, if you watched my previous video, I was going into this components and adding in the components. But during the installation, I actually did this I auto-imported needed the Quasar components and directives. So since I have all auto here, I don't actually need to put the components in directly inside here. So if you go into the official documentation, if you look up anything, like any of the, Vue components, like the card, it always has at the beginning how to install it using the Quasar CLI, and it mentions put it in the component here. But if you just not need it, if you use the auto-import feature, and since we used the auto-import feature when we installed it, I don't actually have to do this. So someone pointed that out in the comments. I appreciate it, and thank you for doing it. So we're going to go through these. As we create this app, we're not going to add anything into the components here. So we do want to add in one other thing here, though. If you had noticed in the app that we're creating, I had went ahead and had a loading spinner And so I do want to do that. So if I go plugins here, I can add in loading. And another one I want to add in is called meta. So I'm going to save those and make sure I can use those later on in the app. If you don't know, if we look here, the documentation, we go to up here. I'm going to get into this later, but if I search for loading, there's this whole loading API, and you can get this Q, a $Q, and you can make some cool loading spinners, and you can kind of stop and start them inside the code. So there's that. So that's all the configuration I want to do right this second. So what I want to do now is something I didn't get to mention in my last video is that you can actually use the Quasar CLI to generate pages and to generate the layouts. So the way the structure of the Quasar app works is that we have layouts, and this is essentially, I guess if you want to start out the farthest out, you would have this app.view where you have this div ID QApp and you have the router view. But really the layouts is the kind of farthest out. And this layout right here, this one's called my layout. This is what gets loaded when the app loads. And the way this happens is if you look at the router file, you choose, in this way, we have this component called layout.view, and then we have children for it. So essentially when you load the root route, it loads the layout, and then all the children can have their own pages inside the layout. And so this is the my layout, and that's why we see this. If we go into the app here, that's why we see this essential links in the top left-hand corner, or this left-hand side, and then we have this top frame up here. So that's where that's coming from. And this is called a shelf. This is the menu icon for the shelf, and it just turns it on and off. But I kind of want to just start from scratch and then show you some of the features. So I'm gonna, if you go run it in the command line, you can run Quasar and you can run Quasar help, and it kind of describes all the different help options. So we know there's one called new and describe, run. So if we do Quasar help or new -h, that will tell you what this new command does. And you can see here you can create pages, you can create layouts, you can create components, boot and store. We're not going to worry about boot and store. We'll come back to boot in a second when we talk about Axios. But we do have pages and layouts. So let's go ahead and use this to create it. So we can do Quasar new, and now we want to create a layout, and I'm going to call it search. And you can see here, I went ahead and just created a new one called search. And this kind of gives you the same sort of layout demo, but it's a little bit different than the one that comes with the app when you start it. And then I'm going to create a new page too. So Quasar new page, and I'm going to call this profile. And this is where we're going to have our profile information. And now we have in our pages, we have this new profile, which is perfect. And also, it gives you a reminder, make sure to reference it in the source router, because otherwise it won't do anything. So I can just do h3, I'll call this profile. And let's go into our search, and let's do a little bit of customization here, because I don't know, I don't like the way it comes out here. And it has, let's just go and delete a few things. So elevated kind of gives you more of this elevated look. Well, before we get too far, let's go to the routes, and let's just change it over from my layout to search. And we're going to leave this index in here for a second, but let's do this. Instead of having this pages in here, let's leave this, and let's leave index here for a second. And instead of having Erik here, we'll have this profile. And, well, keep on changing my mind here, but I'm going to create a new route. I'm going to call it profile. And I want this profile to have this ID. So this is just common inside Vue.js with this : ID, and that means we're going to have some parameters that we can pass to it. And we're going to use the profile.view. I'm going to come back here, and if I reload it, and I'll inspect it there, see what's happening. Oh, actually, I just created the pages. Let me restart the server. So I'll go quasar.dev, or space dev, and that'll go ahead and reload it. Oh, looks like we have an error. It says we don't have a comma here, so I will add it in. And it's trying to reload again. Cool, so I reloaded again. Now you can see this is what it comes out of the, when you generate it, you have these one tab, other tab here at the top. You still have the header here, and it has this footer. So, and if I do /Erik, this is the /Erik profile, but if I do /profile, I don't know, 1. So this is all we have is just the name profile right here. So let's do a little bit of editing of this, of the layout that we just created. So I'm going to go profile, actually go to search, which is our layout. And I have this header here. And so first I'm going to call this, I don't know, Breaking Bad API example. And then I have these tabs. And you can see these, something called a queue route tab. So we can actually have routes assigned to this. So let's do that in a moment. And we have this footer right here. And then we have this toolbar, which is this queue toolbar right here, is this thing here, this shelf, which with this button right here is the icon menu. We're not going to worry about this right now, so I'm going to delete this queue toolbar shelf. It's actually the one at the bottom on the footer I just deleted. And then we're going to come back up to the top, and we're going to delete this button right here too, this queue toolbar. Actually, we'll just delete this button. I want the toolbar, just not the button. And so it's looking a little better, but I still don't like this whole footer right here right now. So I'm going to get rid of this footer. All right, so this is the optional footer. I'm just going to delete it. Okay, now we still have the shelf, which this queue drawer right here. So I'm just going to delete this drawer. Okay, so that's looking a little better. Now this menu, I don't really love, I don't want to keep the tabs, but I want it to be on the same space right here. So let's see if we can just play around with this and do that. So you can see right here, if you kind of look here, it's probably a little hard to see, but there's this header class, and there's this queue layout. So if we look at the code, we have this queue header here and this queue layout. So let's look at the queue header. And that's this one right here. So we can actually just add classes. There's a whole bunch of built-in classes that you can use. You can just go into the styles and identity. You can look at typography. You can do layout and grid. And it has like built-in Flexbox classes. So let's see if we go back to our app here. Oops, go back to the app. I don't know. Let's see here if on this toolbar we set it to row. So one nice thing about Chrome is that it has this .cls, and you can just kind of add classes. And this is perfect because we have all these built-in classes. So if we do row, it sort of looks like this. So that's better, but it's not exactly what we want. Let's see here. If we do row right here, but what if we wanted to get this all on the same line? So let's take a look at how big these are. So one thing we might also be able to do is on this tab list right here, we have the title, and then we have the tab list, and then we have the fixed header. I wonder if we also add in justify start here. What's that gonna do? So if I do, see there's justify around. So that's just like putting in justify and then putting justify flex start, flex around. Justify center. So that helps a little. And then I wonder if I just put right here, I make it column, just make a column right here. Cool. So now that that essentially does it for us. So we added the column. A column, it basically inside Quasar, you can do a 12 column layout. And by adding the column, it makes it, it adds that sort of layout to it. See here, if I put class column and refresh it. Okay, cool. So now we have our class column here. We have our one tab and other tab. Right now they don't do anything because we don't have our routes set up. But let's see, we want, we have this profile page. So let's see if we can at least have it go to the different profile pages. So I'm gonna go back to our search, and you can see we have this 2 here. So I have this icon assignment. I'm gonna delete the icon. I don't really want that. But I'm gonna delete the icon here. I'm gonna save it, and I'm gonna have it add a third one in here. So we're gonna have 3 labels. I'm gonna put the first one is Walter White, the second one as Jesse Pinkman, and the third one as random. And what I want to do here is, this is essentially just like the router link. So we can do a dynamic 2 here. And the way we do it is we have this object that we pass to it. And we're going to put a name. It's going to be profile. And then we can send over params to it, which we want to put ID 1. And that's just directly from looking at the API documentation, so we know that's right. And I'm going to just add it here and then delete this. And I'm going to add it here and delete this. And then this will be ID 2, and this will be ID random. I can get it here, random. Cool, so now I have 3 different ones here. And let me just check my routes again. And did I put, oh, one thing I need to do here is I also need to add a name. So I'll call name profile. So otherwise I couldn't find it. All right, so I saved it there. Now I have my Walter White, my Jesse Pinkman. So if I hit Walter White, cool. So profile, profile 1, profile 2, and random. So now all my routes are working. And then our default route is still going to the index.view. I don't really care about that right now. So if we go open up index.view, I mean, I could just put in, just has the Quasar logo. I could just put in something like, let's see here. Hello. Oh, welcome to Breaking Bad app. And so if I go to the root, welcome to the Breaking Bad app, delete the quote logo here, sweet. And you can see also here, this is flex center. So once again, if I wanted to kind of play around with this text here, I could click the CLS button, and then there's a whole bunch of text ones here. I can put text amber, text amber blue. There's a whole bunch of them that are built in to different colors. I think there's even like yeah, you can make H1, H2, H3. So I can like just put different classes that would change the look and feel of this. But for now, I'll just leave it as is. Okay, so now that we have our route set up, one thing I want to do, well, I'll show you guys one thing we'll need to change here when we switch between these two. So if you remember from my last, let me close a few things here. From the last app, I actually installed the Axios library. And so since I installed the Axios library, it did this import Vue from Vue, import Axios from Axios, and it added onto the prototype for Vue this $Axios. So anytime I do this .axios, I can actually go in and get the Axios to library to do things with. So let's see if we can use that to our advantage. So in our profile here, we don't have anything. So I'm going to do a mounted hook. So this is one of the just normal life cycle hooks. Actually, not mounted, I want it created, excuse me. This is just a normal lifecycle hook that occurs when different parts of the app loads. And what I want to do here is use this Axios library to get the information from our API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get, and I'm going to copy and paste this. Well, actually, I'll just type it out. So it's HTTPS www.breakingbadapi.com/API/characters, and then you pass in an ID. Now, we can actually get the ID from the route that's passed in. So if we use a little ES6 here, interpolation, it's this .route.params.id. And then what we want to do is do something with that. So I could, if I want to, I could await this, or I can use thens. I don't know. Let's just try that. Async. We're gonna do const value await. So we're gonna, well, we'll call it character. Character. And then once we get the character, we want to do something with it. So I'm going to create a data object that's going to return, and we're going to have a character. It's going to just be empty. So now I should be able, let's see if it works first. I'm going to console log character.data. That's how it is in Axios. And let's see if it displays the right information. So I'm going to look at the console, and it looks like it already loaded something. Here's the Walter White one. But if you click on Jesse Pinkman here, nothing happened. I don't see anything new in the console. So nothing's happening here. So this is a good gotcha to keep in mind. Since we are using this API and that we're using this params, it doesn't automatically refresh the component, but we can fix that. And the way to fix that is if we go to the router.view right here in our search, we can actually add a dynamic key to it. So in this profile.view here, we want to, let me make sure I get this right. It's, actually, excuse me, in my search view, it's this key equals, and then we just put $route params ID. And that means anytime that key changes, that we should have it, it should reinitialize the component, so that way we can grab the information that we need. So now if we click on Jesse Pinkman, you can see here's the information from our API for Jesse Pinkman. If we click on Walter White, here's our information for Walter White. So cool, so we made progress. So yeah, so keep that in mind. You need to add the key here as a property inside the router view. Okay, so now we have the character data, but we really want to assign it to the character and then display it inside a profile as the name suggests. So to do that, obviously we do this .character, and we're going to do character.data, and just going to grab the first one. And now we should be able to grab it in the profile. So instead of showing profile right here, I'm going to see if I can grab the character, and I know the name is name. So let's see if it shows up. Cool, so we see Walter White right here, hit Jesse Pinkman, if I hit random, we get an error because this API is slightly different. It's actually character, not with characters. So, I mean, a hokey way of doing this is we can make our URL dynamic. So I can do this. I can do let's URL equals this. However, we could say if this dot route dot params dot id equals random, then the URL, instead of having characters, it'll just be character. And then this will just be URL. Like that. So, I mean, that's a little hokey way to do it, but it'll work. Let's see here. So now if I refresh it, I see here's my random. So Wendy S. If I go Jesse Pinkman, Walter White, random. So, yep, that seems to be all working as we expect it. Okay. So, but let's use some of the cool components inside Quasar to make our profile page look a little nicer than this. All right, so to do that, we're going to use the menu. Actually, excuse me, the card. If you look at the cards, we go here, and I'll just search for card. And that's the installation. You can kind of there's a cool card media here with the image, our changing planet, John Doe, and some lorem ipsum text. So we're going to kind of use that as the basis of how we start. So what I'm going to do here is do that. So first, I'm going to create a class, and I'll create a div to surround everything by. And I'm going to use some of the cool Quasar classes to do it. So we know we have rows, and we know we have classes. Rows and columns. So I'm going to use column here. So, and I'm going to see what happens if I have two on the same one here. So I did columns. I did a column. So now they're stacking on top of each other here. But I kind of want to play around with this. So I want to do justify center and item center. So this is the same thing, essentially doing justify content center and align items center. So I just want all the items vertically and horizontally centered. So now they're all both in the middle. Exactly what we wanted. And we only need one of these. And next, we're going to use the card API. So I'm going to use the Q card here. Oops, Q card. And I'm going to add a class to it called myCard, which I'm going to come back later to. Actually, let's do that right now. I don't want this. I'm going to go down here at the bottom. I'm going to add a style. And the language we're going to use is SCSS, scoped. And I'm going to add my card here. And I'm going to put width 20% for right now. So that should be perfectly fine. Because I don't want these cards to be huge, and this will work fine for me. Okay, so I have this Q card, and if I look at it, there's nothing on here. Make sure I don't get any errors. Nope, looks good. And so first thing I want to do is, can I grab this image? So I'm just going to use the normal image tag here, and I'm going to do character.image, and I'll make it dynamic there. And for right now, I'll just see if it shows up. Cool. So there's Saul Goodman. So we know it's talking to the API. It's reducing the width of this to 20% so it can fit on the screen. That's perfect. Now we're going to add a Q card section. So there's Q card section. And inside here, I'm going to add some classes. Let's see here. I'm going to add a text class. It's actually text-h6. And then inside there, I'm going to use character.name. And I'm going to create another class called, or another div that is, called subtitle2. I'm not sure why element's not working here. There we go. Text.subtitle2. And this will be character.nickname. And so let's take a look at that. Cool. So we have our name and we have the nickname, Mike's granddaughter, on this one. All right. And another one I want to use is a chip. So we're going to use another Q card section. And I'm going to use a Q chip. But this time in the chip, I'm going to, basically I'm going to grab the occupation. And the way I want to do this is I'm going to do a v4. I'm going to do occupation in character.occupation. And so this is an array that's inside each one of them. And I'll put color teal. You need to put a key in here, so key will be occupation. Text color, I don't know, white. Icon equals bookmark. So let's see if that worked. Oh, we got an error here. Unexpected character and attribute name. So color teal, key, occupation, text color equals. It's supposed to be equals. Cool. So now we have low-level meth distributors. So that's their occupation. So that's coming up cool. And if there's more than one, it would kind of just stack right below it. All right. So we have the picture showing up inside the card. We have the name. We have the chip. One thing I also want to do is add a modal. So every time you click on the person's name, a little pop-up shows up. So that should be pretty easy. And by the way, let's take an example of this Q-chip. If you're watching along and you're like, how did you know all that? So if you go into Q-chip, you go to the Q-chip API, and it tells you it has 3 buttons: props, slots, and events. So props are everything, all these values right here is v4 equals, color equals, the key equals. These are props that you're passing in. So like, for example, well, we can do this. This is a built-in Vue directive. So these v4 is a directive. But some of these, you can just put whatever you want to pass in. Like you can pass in the icon right, the label. So general, there's tab index. You can pass in the value and selected. State, you can put clickable, removable, disabled. And you can put ripple, dense, size. So I can even put in a ripple. So I don't know, let's try this. If I put ripple equals true, and I come back here, well, I would have to have this, I guess I would have to have it like clickable or something. But yeah, you can kind of take a look here and see some of the styles and what it's doing here. Like text color I added in earlier was one of these props that you can add in. So you can kind of get an idea of what things you can do with the Q-chip API. So I just want to pass that along in case you were like, how did you know all this? I just looked through here and you could see, and also it's in a lot of the examples as well. Okay, so now we have occupation. One thing I want to do now is add in a way for it to have that modal pop up. And the way we do that is under this Q card section, we have a Q card, and then we have a div that holds everything together, and a Q page. But we can put right underneath this div here, we'll create a Q dialog. And to control the dialog, we're going to create a new property called alert. And so we'll need to come back here to our data and create alert. And I don't know, we'll keep it false. So if it's true, it opens up. If it's false, it's closed. And then inside here, we'll do another Q card. And we can do a Q card section, just like we did before. And I don't know, text. And we'll put H6 here. And we'll call it birthday info. And then we'll have the Q card section again. And this time we'll put in information here. So character dot, you don't have to pass anything in. It has all the variables that you would expect. And we need to have a way to close it. So we have to do a Q card actions. And we'll make sure it's align equals right. That'll have a way to close it here. And we'll use a Q button. And there's a bunch of things you can add in for a Q button. We can make it flat. We can put the label for it, be okay. We can add a color, make it one of the primary colors. And then we had this V close pop-up, and that'll make sure it actually closes. So let's see if that worked. So now if we click on it, nothing's happening. Because now we need to actually have some way to make this vModal alert equal true. So we can add a button somewhere, but I just did this on the image just as an example. So I had a click event, and then you could just put alert equals true, or I could have a method that this triggers. But if I just alert equals true here, now I have birthday info. So this guy doesn't have any birthday info, so it's just blank. But if I go to Walter White, I can see here that's the birthday at least given from the TV show. Cool. So yeah, I think we've covered a lot. Let's take a look at the loading spinner. So if you remember at the beginning of the video, I did this route, or excuse me, in the Quasar comp file. I added in loading and meta, and we'll get to meta in a second. Oh, we'll do loading and then we'll look at meta. So loading is cool because what we could do is this async method here. We could have as soon as the route loads, I can show us loading spinner, and then when this resolves, I can get rid of the loading spinner. And if we look at the official documentation of loading, if you look at the loading API, it has a bunch of information here. You can see you can import this queue spinner gears, and then you can use that when you do this loading.show. So I'll show you how that works. So first, I'm going to import in queue spinner cube, which is one I like, from Quasar. And I must have not put that in the right place. There it is. Did I spell that right? Q SPINNER cube. Since I'm not using it anywhere, it's giving me a squiggly line, but we'll use it in a second. So now in the created hook, I can do this $Q loading dot show, and then I can pass a bunch of values to it. So I can put a message first. And once again, if I didn't know what all those were, I would. Well, this one's a little bit different. You have to kind of dig through more of the documentation to find everything it takes, but it shows in some of the examples. But you can put the message like loading, and then I can put the spinner color if I want. I don't know, let's make it blue. And then also I can choose which type of spinner I want to see. So I'm going to use the Q spinner cube. So that's going to show it, but we obviously want it to end it. So after the await resolves, so we do the URL here, and then we await. This is where we'd want to loading dot, I think it's hide. Yeah, it's loading dot hide. So we'll save it there. So let's see what happens. So now I hit Walter White. Ooh, so you can see here I don't see it. Let's just do a quick refresh. So let's see here. Maybe it's super fast and we're not seeing it. So I'm going to do a timeout. Well, let's just get rid of it here and see if it just stays on the screen forever. Okay, so you can see here it's definitely working. It was just super fast and we couldn't see it. So what I could do is if I want to fake that it's working, I can create a set timeout, and this creates an arrow function here, and then I'll do the hide here, and I'll just do it every, I don't know, 400 milliseconds. I'll wait 400 milliseconds. So now if I click on something, you see the loading timer for a second, and then it disappears. So it just doesn't like instantly disappear, and look kind of weird. So I kind of like that better. And of course I could play around with this, and if you are paying attention at home, you probably noticed that I'm using an await function here, and I'm not wrapping it in a try catch or any other kind of error catching. So if this await failed, I don't know what would happen here. Let's see here. If I put Breaking Bad 1, so I give it a wrong URL, would the loading spinner go away? No. See, there's nothing to catch it. And it got an error, so the loading spinner never goes away. It never hits this timeout, this queue loading hideout. So you would have the loading spinner there forever. So that would be a bug. So obviously the right way to fix that would be to wrap this in a try-catch block and make sure that or wrap this in another air wrapping function. I've done it. I did a video on that. And then make sure when the catch happens that you also hide the spinner. I've had that happen in production, I think, once. Not in production, but in an app I've created before. Okay, so we're almost done. One other thing I wanted to show you, there's so many things, and I could spend like 6 hours just making an app with like 10,000 things that this really cool framework has. Is the title. You can see this Quasar app is the title, and that's not good. So we have this meta plugin. So I can go into the layout I'm using, which is called the search. And, you know, in hindsight, you probably should call it search layout. Probably make more sense. Anyways, you can do meta here. And then in this meta object, you put in a title. So I can call it Breaking Bad App. And you can also add other meta things inside there. But now it says Breaking Bad App. All right. I think that's plenty that we covered today. Make sure I don't have any other errors. Like I said, I went pretty quick there, especially through a lot of the code that went into the profile. But it's essentially really simple. You can use cue card sections everywhere. Just look up the documentation on what kind of props and what things you can put into it. And you after a while, you just start memorizing these different ones. Like if you want to do rows, columns, justify center, item center, there's so many of them. Like I said, just click on the text you want and just start playing around with a CLS. And it looks like I need to free up some storage space. But I think there's some flex ones there too. If you want to use flex center, flex wrap, things like that. Okay, cool. Thank you guys for listening and watching. If you guys have any questions, make sure you leave a link below. I'd love to hear what you guys think of the Quasar framework. Leave a comment below. And if you guys really like this, I might do a third video where I can go even in more depth. Maybe we can look at some of the other plugins, maybe the other components. Maybe we can add some like search capabilities in here and add pagination and a bunch of other things. Maybe we can have a page that has all of the Breaking Bad people in it. We can also work with the responsive layouts. I didn't even get into that. There are ways that we could make this more responsive, that there's some built-in responsive classes that we could use to make this even more responsive. And that would be awesome. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below and what you want me to see next. Really appreciate it. Thanks.